We come now to part 2, and the question is that part 2 stand part.
Mr Chair.
Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr Chair. A pleasure to finally rise and speak to part 2 of the bill. This is the part that brings in 26 weeks paid parental leave, and it brings it in on the 1st of April 2018. So for all of those members who are debating the bill without having read it and naming different dates that are completely wrong, can I encourage them please to read the bill? It is the 1st of April 2018 where this bill proposes that New Zealanders should be able to embrace 26 weeks paid parental leave. And why 26 weeks paid parental leave? Well, it's not just a figure plucked out of the air. It's not just a figure that is, an excuse for trying to filibuster a bill. It is a number that is based on, and no, it's not politicising the issue of children and their families as the government is so interested in doing. It is based on what the World Health Organisation says, actually. So I'd like government members to listen up to that. The World Health Organisation recommends exclusive breastfeeding to 6 months. They recommend this not because it's their personal view, but because of the research and evidence that says that if, as a country, we can support women to be able to achieve that, and I acknowledge that not everyone can, but where we can, we should, because that will reduce the amount of money the rest of us have to pay on hospital admissions. So even if we were to be completely selfish about this, that would be a good enough reason in itself. But I'm not prepared to be completely selfish about this because it's also about the health of that child, the health and well-being of that child throughout their entire life. So from the age of 26 weeks, right through their adolescencehood, right through their adulthood, and the ability for them to lead the most fulfilling life possible. Isn't that what we should all be embracing? Isn't that what we here in this Parliament should be dedicating our time towards? Because I certainly believe that is what we should be doing. So 26 weeks hasn't been plucked out of the air, and yes, there are arguments for, as it becomes affordable to this country, to look to extend it further at other times. But that is not the argument that the Labour Party is mounting at this point in time. We are saying right here, right now, in fact, in 2012, right there, right now, it was affordable and it still is today. How do I know this? I know this because how ironic is it that we're having this debate here today on the very same day that the government has plucked a figure out of the air of $20 billion for defence. Here we have the government MPs today saying that 26 weeks paid parental leave is unaffordable, but on the very same day, $20 billion magically plucked out of the air for defence, well, that's affordable. And I think that tells us everything we need to know about the government's priorities. Defence spending over children. Isn't that what we expect to see from a national government? And it's been played out again today. So I want to put on the table the agreed figures, not the made-up figures, not the trumped-up, exaggerated ones that the government MPs have been using tonight, but the figures given to us by officials and agreed to by the Select Committee, where around that table we were able to get rid of the politics for that nanosecond of time and focus on the things that mattered. And here's what we agreed to. We agreed that to reach 26 weeks paid parental leave, that in the next financial year, that's financial year 2016/17, it would be $12.7 million. In the budget year 17/18, it would be $65.4 million additional. And at full implementation in the year 2018/19, it would reach $107 million. Sounds like a lot of money when you're working on your household budget, but here's the other element, is that we also agreed, because officials gave us the research and evidence and data that supported it, that on full implementation there's around $30 million worth of immediate savings. That's not even going near the big cost savings out in future years that all the experts tell us are where the big cost savings are to be had. That's on day one. On day one of implementing 26 weeks paid parental leave that part 2 requests that Part 2 brings into law, then we would save in the order of $30 million every year. Mr Chair, so we need to think about this in the context, because these are big numbers. What does it mean in the context of government spending? Well, for next year, it would mean just 0.7% of the additional money that the government has already committed in the budget. Not the entire amount that the government's spending. That's such a small decimal point, I can't even get my head around that. But just the additional spending of the $1.8 billion of additional spending this government did without raising anyone's taxes, without causing any major drama, 0.7% of that amount is what this bill would cost in that year. Let's go to the 17-18 budget year. It would be 3.6% of the additional spending that the government is planning for that year. And then, as I said before, finally we'd get to the gross amount of $107 million. People might wonder why there's a bit of disagreement going on between the National Party and this side about what the costings are. There shouldn't be any room for disagreement because the officials' figures are the official figures. But here's the game that they're playing. What they're doing is that they're adding them all up, all those years up together for 5 years, and then they're adding a bit on the top as well. That's what they're doing. Because I heard several of those people, of those members, say $500 million. And it's not even 466 either, Mr Hudson. No, it's not. Because what we've agreed to in the Select Committee is to work on the return to work assumptions. So that what this means is that not everyone is going to take, they're not assumptions because they are based on what actually happens right now. It's based on what actually happens right now, that not every single woman, when they take their 18 weeks paid parental leave, they don't all take 18 weeks. They don't all take the 18 weeks. So it's based on real life data, what we know, and I'm surprised that members that were on the Select Committee don't understand this, because we went through it, dotted the I's and crossed all the T's on it. We had a lot of debate about it and they still don't seem to get it. What we know is that 2 months before the paid parental leave provision runs out, that around about 5% of women will return to work. Why will they return to work? Well, there's a number of different reasons, but more and more frequently it's because the payment for paid parental leave is nothing near their ordinary wage, which means that they can't afford to stay off work for any longer. And as that government keeps putting housing costs up all the time, they are struggling to pay the rent, they are struggling to pay the mortgages, they're never going to be able to save to get into their first home. And so people are returning to work sooner. So 5% of them will come back in the 4th month. A further 10% of them we know will come back at month 5, and by the time we get to the 6th month, the 26 weeks, then another 15% of them will have already returned to work. And so those are the figures that MOBI, sorry, I should call it by its right name, its correct name, MOBI used those figures to inform the committee. And now that government are using other figures to try and trump it up to make it sound like it's more expensive than it actually will be. What is their motivation? What could possibly be their motivation? Well, they're trying to give some sort of bizarre justification to a financial veto. That's why they're using trumped-up figures. It's disrespectful to families. It's disrespectful to the Select Committee process. It's disrespectful to all of the submitters who came and talked to us and asked us to make sure that we got it costed properly. And it's disrespectful to the officials who worked hard on providing this information for the Select Committee. I urge the government MPs not to continue to play politics with this bill, not to continue to exaggerate the figures when they know the truth of the cost, and not to try and give themselves an excuse for the embarrassment that they are now bringing upon themselves to suffer of putting a veto against the democratic process in this parliament. Because that's the position they're putting themselves in. They are arguing against the majority of New Zealanders. They are arguing against the majority of MPs. And I want to say to those MPs who are taking this seriously, who are giving it the due respect and the scrutiny that it deserves, that those MPs have made this decision after giving full scrutiny to the research and evidence, to the financial information, looking at the broader picture and saying, yes, this is affordable for New Zealand now. Not only is it affordable, but if we don't do it, then we are choosing a future that's not good for New Zealand.
I call Paul Foster-Bell.